who is more interested in serving his political career or his biggest donors or these corporations that we have been battling right here in Beaumont, Texas, than he is in serving the people of this community. You tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he holds town hall meetings right here in this union hall. At least not very often, right? If we're going to achieve this vision, if we're going to overcome this guy, it's going to take all of us doing all we can with what we have, where we are. And I ask you to join me in this fight. Angela and Chrissy are in the back. They're wearing yellow vests. We have 2 other volunteers here in yellow vests. All of them are holding clipboards. And on those clipboards, they will add your name if you're willing to knock on doors and go meet the voters who are going to decide the outcome of this election. It will not be won solely by the candidate or that candidate's political party. We can raise all the money in the world. We can devise the most amazing television ads. You may or may not see them. You may have developed an immunity to them. But if another human being from this community knocks on your door, locks eyes with you, face to face, human being to human being, you will never, ever forget that conversation. And for the hundreds of thousands of our fellow Texans who have not been voting, whose voices have not been heard, this is their invitation to come into this democracy, participate in this election, and provide our margin of victory on the night of November 8th. You all with me on this? We're going to do this together. We're going to do this for one another. We're going to make each other and the generations that follow us proud. We're going to have a moment to take a few questions and hear your comments. Cynthia Cano, who is right over here in the green shirt, has another microphone. But as she gets ready to recognize our first question, on behalf of everyone in this campaign, I just want to say thank you, Beaumont, for having us out and having our back as well. Yeah, I'm going to ask you. You talk about this. Thank you. Ms. Cano.
Before we do that, I was told there's some VIPs we need to recognize. Ms. Misty Bishops, Texas Senate District 4. Misty, are you here?
Thank you, Misty.
We have the amazing Zena Stevens, the sheriff. And also please give a round of applause for Chelsea Ramos, candidate for 317th District Court. To the room. I see the first one over here, and then I would just ask to keep it to one question, please, so we can get to as many hands as we possibly can.
All right. I have 3 autoimmune diseases, and with the current abortion, a return of Roe v. Wade, there is a drug called methotrexate that is used to treat cancer and has been for decades, and also used to treat autoimmune diseases. With Roe v. Wade being overturned, there are women that are being turned away at pharmacies trying to fill prescriptions of methotrexate. I wanted to know if you were aware of that. Not only because it can cause miscarriage. So if you're a man and you walk in a pharmacy, you're able to obtain this medication to treat your autoimmune diseases or treat cancer. MD Anderson uses it all the time. But women of childbearing age are being refused this drug in the Golden Triangle. So I wanted to know, A, were you aware of that? And B, do you have any ideas or anything that you could put in motion that would help people to be able to obtain this life-saving medication?
Thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing this. This is so helpful. This is why we hold these town hall meetings. And this is how we break through to people who may be on the other side of this line currently that I talked about. I met a woman in Dallas who told me that she's prescribed methotrexate for a very aggressive form of arthritis. But because she is of childbearing age, she can no longer receive the prescription in Dallas, Texas. She says, look, I'm lucky, I have privilege, I can fly to California, which is where I go fill that prescription right now. But she said, you know what, Beto, guess how long I'm staying in this state? when I have to fly out of state to just treat arthritis. You've heard other proposals coming down the pike where if you try to leave this state and you're of childbearing age and you're a woman, they're going to check your travel documents and make sure that you're not going to do something that they don't agree with here. Already, Republican state legislators have written a letter on Freedom Caucus letterhead and sent it to some of the largest firms in Texas and said, don't you dare fund the out-of-state travel of your female employees. Stranger than fiction, hard for us to have cooked up, and yet if we were just paying attention, they promised us they were going to do this if they got enough power, and this is exactly what they are doing. The reason I think it's so important to tell these stories, I'll just tell you, my very Catholic mother, when we have this conversation, and I say, Mom, I know that this probably was not the intention of folks who consider themselves pro-life, but over the last 10 years, during this continuous attack on abortion rights, as almost every reproductive health care clinic in Texas has closed, not only has it become impossible to get an abortion, but try getting a cervical cancer screening, try seeing a family planning provider, try going to a doctor of any kind in so many of our underserved communities right now. That helps to explain why Texas leads the developed world in a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas as it is for white women in the state of Texas. I tell my mom that, and I can see that there is some common ground that is opening up between us. When a reminder that we lead the country not only in the rate of teen pregnancy, but repeat teen pregnancy because we don't have these family planning services. I have got her attention. So look, first order of business is to win this race because it will be the first time in 32 years that we will have elected a pro-choice Democrat, the last one being the great Ann Richards. That will send shockwaves through the system. It will bring the other side to the table. It gives us the power to veto other bad ideas that are coming down, and we finally have some leverage. And I'm going to learn something about leverage from President Carl, who he and his membership did something extraordinary in their negotiations. I want to make sure that we have that same tenacity, that same strength, that same courage when we fight for the women of this state. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Your manager, I mean, I fought with Beto real hard for when we won against Cruz. And El Paso, Texas, I had the pleasure. And I'm so happy to see my white Obama, the black side. And I told him once he was like Kennedy to me, and I still believe that, you know. I want to ask you, what do you see different from that fight? Because I just knew we won. We were standing in the stadium, we were waiting in El Paso. I just knew we just had it. And what do you see differently? Because I see that you're more black educated on our passion, the things that happen with our plight. You know, I see that now, and I just love Cynthia. I'm so glad that she's here again. And what do you see? I mean, you know, I'm with you. You know, I love your mother. She's a beautiful woman. What do you see? What do you see as far as being victorious this time? Because I thought we won last time.
Yes, I sure did too. And when you all saw when President Trump forced Greg Abbott last year to authorize a recount in Texas of the 2020 election that Trump won in Texas, and I just thought, well, while you're at it, go recount 2018, because I think we won that one too. So, folks, it's because of everyone in the room, it's because of you. Together, in 2018, we produced the largest voter turnout in a midterm since 1970. Young voter turnout. Young people in the room, you were up 504% from the previous midterm election. We became the first Democratic campaign to win the 4 major metro areas and their surrounding counties since LBJ did it in 1964. But we didn't beat Cruz. We helped to flip control of the House of Representatives through 2 big congressional pickups in Houston and in Dallas, 12 new Democratic state reps. In Harris County alone, 17 African-American women won judicial positions in 2018. We did some big work that transformed this state. And the question is, how do we bring it home now in 2022? One, you gotta know that we are building on that base. So we made millions of voter contacts in 2018. Some of you did them, knocking on doors, making phone calls, texting folks. We have all those relationships, that information. We're right back at those doors confirming that they will be with us in this election. That's huge, and that's a big difference. We've raised $3 million more than Greg Abbott in the last reporting period. $500,000 unique contributions. If you haven't heard this yet, I want to share with you that our largest group of contributors, bar none, to the campaign has been school teachers in the state of Texas. Those are the ones who raised $27 million. My heroes. And I don't know what this counts for anymore, because who can predict this stuff, but Quinnipiac, which is the gold standard in political polling, took the measure of this race in December. We'd just gotten in. And they had Greg Abbott up 15 points against us. Well, they measured it again a few weeks back. He's down to 5 points ahead, and we're gaining ground every single day. And on this trip over the last 10 days, we've been to communities like Pecos, like Muleshoe, like Spearman, like Dalhart, like Pampa, like Quanah. Just today, we were in Hemp Hill and Woodville. Yesterday, we were in Palestine with 450 people in Palestine, Texas. Those are showing up in record numbers. And here's another one of the big differences that makes me feel so good about what we're doing. We are so clearly drawing this line that you heard me talk about at the outset. This other guy who literally cannot keep the lights on, who allowed the energy corporations, the pipeline companies, the traders to take $11 billion from us over 5 days when people in Texas were literally freezing to death last February, and then pass the bill on to all of us, even those of us in El Paso and Beaumont who are not part of ERCOT. We're paying $45 more per month on average. We call that the Abbott tax. Go ahead and pass that one around. We showed the $20 billion more in property taxes that we're all paying on his watch. And remember this? The guy who, when the reporter asked him during that abortion bill signing ceremony, Mr. Governor, you know that there's no exception for rape? And he says, oh, that's okay, we're gonna eliminate rape in the state of Texas. More rapes have been committed in the state of Texas than any other state. Right now, in DPS headquarters, which he has control over in Austin, Texas, there are thousands of untested rape cases. The ability to bring a rapist to justice has declined by half on his watch. So whether it's the inflation that he's causing, the incompetence and corruption when it comes to the grid, the fact that we are less safe and criminals are doing far better under Greg Abbott than they ever have before, we're going to take the case to this guy every day, every night, keep him on the ropes and the back foot, and we are going to win this together. There we go.
Right, Bella, this is my wife and my hero. She's a kindergarten teacher. Public school. You're 100% right. If God forbid she had to stand between a bullet and a student, she would do it. My question is, what can I do to make sure she should never have to?
Thanks for being here. Thank you for what you do. And I think it's a real act of courage. And maybe we throw that word around too much, but in this case it is true. To go back into that classroom, given all of the challenges that you already face before we even think about a school shooting. I cannot tell you how many educators have approached me since Uvalde and told me they're leaving the profession, that's just it, they're not going back. Others, a chemistry teacher in San Antonio who said, you know what, I feel kind of guilty because my classroom as a chemistry teacher has these big lab tables, and I and my students can hide behind them. I think we're a little bit better protected than the English teacher or the social studies teacher or the math teacher down the hall. We were in Lubbock, Texas. Lest anybody think this is just a blue city or Democratic issue that people are concerned about, and a reliable conservative Republican voter says, my 9-year-old, before he goes back into that classroom this academic year, he's already tested all of the crank wound windows. He knows which ones are stuck and which ones work. And I've told him as his father, this guy tells me, that you are not to hide under your desk, not to go into the closet. I don't care what they told you in the active shooter drill. You're getting the hell out of that classroom through that window that works. Now, why in the world are we having these conversations with our kids? Or are you having these conversations with your wife? And I mentioned earlier, at some point, we are going to have to face an accounting. I mean, that's our conscience, it's our creator. For me, it's my kids. They're going to school on Monday. They're going right back into this with not a single thing changing. And listen, for the educators, you know your classroom, you know your campus, you know your district better than I ever will. If there are things that we can do to quote unquote harden that campus and improve security, let's follow your lead. Let's do that. The governor, the day after that Uvalde shooting, he says, oh, it's a mental health care issue. But the interesting thing about that, by the way, is that the month before, he withdrew $211 million from the mental health care budget. We are 51st in mental health care spending already in the state of Texas. But listen, let's take him at his word. I do think we need more mental health care spending. Let's go ahead and do that. But if we fail to confront the challenge, the elephant in the room, that we are allowing 18-year-olds to buy not one, but two weapons originally designed for use in combat, whose high impact, high velocity round, when it hits your body, it liquefies everything inside. That AR-15 was designed for use originally in Vietnam. It's supposed to penetrate the enemy soldier's helmet at 500 feet. Those kids did not have a helmet on. They were not 500 feet away. They were much closer. Their parents and the physicians who saw them after that shooting had to identify them by DNA and by the shoes that they were wearing. So look, I know that this is, and maybe fewer people know it the way I know that this is, a tough issue to talk about in Texas. But our kids are going to say to us down the road, I don't care how tough it was, I hope you did the right thing. So, if we will put pressure on those who represent us, and it does not matter, no me importa if they're Republicans or Democrats, let's just assume that they have the well-being of our kids and our families at heart, and just say, look, we may not see eye to eye on all this. I mean, for example, I for one don't think anyone should have an AR-15 or an AK-47. Keep that on the battlefield. We don't need it as But even if we can't get there together, we can raise the minimum age of purchase. That kid in Uvalde, he waited patiently because the law said you have to be 18 to buy one of these things. He didn't, people say, well, criminals will just do whatever the hell criminals want to do. And in some cases, that might be true. But this guy followed the law. The law said he needed to be 18. He waited until he was 18. Walked into that gun store, legally bought those two AR-15s and those hundreds of rounds of ammunition. If we raise the age to 21, we've at least purchased 3 more years for some kind of intervention, for his brain to continue to form and develop. You know, your prefrontal cortex is not connected when you're 18. You're still developing. Your impulse control is a little bit diminished. You still have some growing to do, okay? So there's that. There's a universal background check, and folks will say, hey, I just bought a firearm yesterday at the store, Beto. I had to go through a background check. And I get that. But if you buy from a private seller, you don't have to go through a background check. Midland, Odessa. A month after the El Paso shooting in 2019, guy walks into a gun store, tries to buy an AR-15, doesn't pass the background check. Good, that works. So he goes to a private seller and buys the exact same firearm out of the trunk of that guy's car, turns around and uses it on people in his community, killing 8 of them. A background check, a universal one, would have prevented that. Red flag laws, that means you already have the firearm, but you're sending signals that you're going to use that firearm against yourself, against your wife, or your boyfriend, or your girlfriend, against the kids in your classroom. The Uvalde shooter, prior to buying those firearms, was called the school shooter by his friends because he was sending these signals out and the people around him were picking them up. I mentioned the mom of the shooter in El Paso calling the police in Allen, Texas. We do not have a law on the books right now that allows us to intervene. So raising the minimum age of purchase, ensuring we have universal background checks, having a red flag law. That does nothing to diminish your Second Amendment right to own that firearm. Own it all you want. All we ask is that you own it responsibly and that you do a better job of protecting your wife, you in that classroom, and those kids in front of you, because the only thing we want you worried about is how you're going to make sure that you draw forth their love of learning. That's it. We're behind you. We're with you. We're on your side of the line when it comes to this one. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Mayor, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I just want to say welcome to Beaumont, and I just want you to know that Beaumont, Jefferson County, we got you.
Thank
I want to say to everyone in this room, please, let's not wait. Let's get started now. Get out there. Make sure everyone in your family is registered.
Yes.
We have enough people registered to win this, but we just got to make sure that they all show up to the polls. So please, everyone, don't take anyone for granted. Just make sure that you're getting everyone that you know to the polls. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I have a question for my son. He couldn't be here tonight.
Please.
And he says, as a Texas Union pipeliner for 10 years, my experience at Union Workyard, Trump Cruise and Abbott bumper stickers on every truck. What do you do to convince these blue collar and middle class men and women that they're voting for the wrong party? We have union members that are voting for a party that doesn't support them.
Thank you for being here. I think in answer to your son's question, we have got to show up for one another and be there for them. It is really hard to fly underneath the constant barrage of Fox News right now. It's going to try to scare you with every caricature under the sun about who we are. That we're socialists, that we're un-American, that we're open borders, that we're whatever they're going to make up next. The only way I know to get past that is to literally be with people where they are. I mentioned the first stop today was in Hemp Hill, Texas. And in Hemp Hill, Texas, there were supporters. There were folks who came to oppose our visit. And then there were those who just came to sit and listen and hear what I had to say. One of the people there, a guy named Gary, wearing a Make America Again hat, Make America Great Again hat, wearing a red MAGA shirt as well. You know, reading the book by the cover, I did not think he was with us, right? He got up and he asked a question, just as you did right now, and he said, hey, look, I feel like I have followed the rules. I've worked my tail off. My mom immigrated from Canada. She worked 3 jobs to make sure that I and my World War II disabled veteran dad had what we needed. And I just feel like right now there are some people who aren't following the rules, who aren't following the law. And I'm concerned about what I'm reading and what I'm seeing, especially at the southern border. Very legitimate question. And he asked it so civilly and politely, it brought me in, especially the story about his mom sacrificing for him. And so I said what I shared with you earlier. I said, look, we owe you and everyone, including those immigrants who want to come here, a safe, legal, orderly path. You want to come to this country? Wonderful. Follow our laws. And on our side, we're going to update our laws to reflect our values, our interests, and our needs. I talked about some of the ways that we're going to be able to do that. We had a longer conversation. He comes up afterwards to shake my hand. No joke, gives Cynthia Cano a great big hug and says, you know what, I may vote for you in this election. And that's not the book that I was reading. So, here we are in Southeast Texas, and you look at the refining capacity in these communities. You look at the workers who produce the energy independence for America. You know, I drove here today in a Toyota Tundra, and it burns gasoline. And I thank God that we extracted these resources from this state. We refined them in this community, and we no longer have to go to war half a world away to secure our energy lines, right? We are independent because of those working these jobs. People perhaps like your son and those who he works with. So please tell him I'm so grateful for and proud of the work that he does. And for some period, really for the foreseeable future, we're going to still have some oil and gas needs in the state. Maybe even more so, given inflation that we have right now and the price of gas. Let's make sure that we're producing enough to meet our needs. And given the fact that Russia just invaded Ukraine, and many of us just learned that 10% of the oil that we're using in this country was imported from Russia, I'd like to see more of that come here. But if we can marry that with some of the amazing things that I've seen at Lamar University, where you're doing groundbreaking work on geothermal, which has a one-to-one match on the skill set and experience and expertise that we get from drilling for oil and gas. Add to that, wind, hydrogen, solar, battery storage. We own the energy world right now, but we won't own it going forward if we don't get after it. And I'll tell you this, the steel workers, members of the AFL-CIO, the electricians, the pipe fitters, the plumbers, all those folks I mentioned earlier, wrote a climate jobs plan for the state of Texas. It's the folks who are members of this union right here who proposed this plan. They're not Democrats, they're not Republicans, they're not independents. They're folks who want to make sure that they have great jobs, that they have a seat at the table as we write the energy policy for this century. You know what they came up with? It's many of those industries that I just talked about, making sure that they're high-paying, high-value, high-skilled jobs that are union jobs. And also, in addition, making sure that we retrofit buildings just like this, our homes, our offices, our schools, to be more energy efficient. It demands less from the grid. It allows us to confront the challenge of climate before it's too late. And those are great jobs that you cannot outsource anywhere else. So please tell your son, and please ask him to tell his coworkers, we're on their side of the line. We're fighting for them as working Texans. Thank you for being here. And we're going to show up for you. Thank you.
Hey Beto, glad to see you again. We were here last time you were in Beaumont. And,
Thanks for coming out.
back to your discussion on the background checks on guns. My husband recently went and bought a gun in Corpus Christi, and he was asked if he had a license to carry, which he does, which is 3 years old. The man looked at it and said, okay, that's all I need. My husband came out there and said, how does he know I haven't robbed a bank since then? How does he know anything? He asked nothing of me.
Well, we used to need that license to carry, to take that gun out.
Right,
Now we
in
don't.
fact, at the time we did take our class, it was still a law, which the great thing was when you went and bought a gun, you had to have a background check. Then when you took the class, you had to have a background check, which was a catch-all in case you bought it from Bubba and didn't get one the first time, you got it the second time. But now you got one, and it's 2 or 3 years old. They don't know what kind of crimes you commit. The man he didn't do his job. Just because my husband and myself have a license to carry doesn't mean that we hadn't done something since then. He still should have had to do a background check when he bought it from that business. And that shocked both of us.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Listen, that license to carry program really was kind of the pride for responsible gun owners in most of the rest of the country. It meant that if you wanted to take a firearm out onto the streets and even onto a college campus, or really almost anywhere you wanted to go unless it was expressly prohibited, you had to go under a background check. You had to have some firearms training so that we know that you're proficient in using this thing. Now, I've met firearms instructors who say, back when we had a license to carry, people would come in, first-time gun owners, they didn't know what end the bullet came out of. And thank God I was there. But Greg Abbott, there's this proposal from the NRA and the gun lobby, and the folks who make money off of selling these things. And we don't begrudge them a profit, but when it comes at the expense of our lives, we might have a problem there. He listens to them and signs a bill that does away with license to carry and replaces it with something called permitless carry, where now there's no background check, no license, no vetting, no proficiency, no training at all. You're just good to go to take that gun out on the streets. The reason so many cops and sheriff's deputies argued against this and begged the governor not to sign it was because 38,000 times, and I know the sheriff knows this, 38,000 times over the last 5 years, a license to carry request was denied in the state of Texas. 38,000 times they deemed that person applying just too dangerous to themselves or to all of us, maybe a violent criminal background that can lead us to believe that they'd use that firearm against their wife or against somebody at work. Well, now that we have permitless carry, all 38,000 of those people are really free to carry those guns on our streets, and we're none the wiser or the safer for it. And now imagine this, the tens of thousands of people who never applied for a license to carry back when we had it, because they knew they wouldn't have passed the background check, they're out there as well. More cops, more sheriff's deputies, more members of law enforcement have been gunned down in this state than any other in the union. We are seeing a spike in gun violence right now. This is not safe. This is not part of that responsible tradition of gun ownership that we had in Texas. So, to your point, let's get back to something that makes sense. Let's listen to law enforcement. Let's repeal permitless carry and re-implement that background check if you want to carry and
Hi, Beto. My name is Jimmy John Makins. I'm the chair of the Triangle Caucus. We gather together to focus on the LGBTQ plus community of Southeast Texas. Our primary focus has been get out the vote. My concern is with the passing or the deletion of Roe versus Wade, and I think that they're going to go for marriage equality too. I have several friends that are concerned about this, that they're going to get a knock on the door in the middle of the night and be dragged out into the streets. There is so much anti-LGBTQ legislation out there these days. What are you going to do to bridge the gap between the communities so that I feel safe and my friends and family, brothers and sisters feel safe?
Thanks for being here. Thanks for the work that you do. Thanks for asking the question. I don't know about you all, and not all of us are Democrats in this room, right? And if you're a Republican, you're welcome to your independence. We love you too. We want everybody to be represented. But for my friends who are Democrats, many of us are sick and tired of Democrats being on the defensive, right? And being on the back foot and really just taking it, always reacting and responding instead of being on the offense, on the attack, and really pushing the issue. And I think part of the reason that we got to where we are right now with this total abortion ban, and next on the block is same-sex intimacy, a revival of our sodomy laws in the state of Texas, which they are proposing right now, and ending marriage equality, is because we have not been standing up and fighting for one another and been proud of who we are. So not only do we need to stop the bad stuff that is coming down the pike, and you know as soon as this next legislative session starts, they've already proposed a Don't Say Gay bill for this next year. Someone's going to propose, after Justice Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion, that we end marriage equality in the state of Texas and try to force that back up to the Supreme Court. Not only do we have to fight that as well, but we got to go on the offense. And what does that mean? So in Texas today, though it is not okay, though this is not right, it is perfectly legal to fire someone or refuse to hire them because they're gay. Though in Texas, even though this is not right and it's not okay, it is perfectly legal to deny a same-sex couple the ability to adopt a child. That's legal in the state of Texas. And of course, you know that we have a governor who's basically written a search warrant at large for families of transgender kids, accusing those parents of child abuse in the state of Texas. So in addition to winning this race on a platform that proudly supports the LGBTQ community, we've got to go change those laws on the book. We got to make sure that if you are seeking a job, they cannot discriminate against you based on anything, whether it's the color of your skin, your gender, your sexual orientation, your country of national origin. None of that matters. What only matters is your talent and your drive. We're going to recognize you for the content of your character and nothing else here in the state of Texas. If you want to adopt a child, the same way. If you are the parent of a transgender child, and I've met the parents of these transgender kids who, I tell you what, folks, are some of the best parents I've ever met. They're helping their kid navigate one of the toughest moments that I can imagine in a child's life. And year after year, many of them take their kids to the state capitol to remind the legislators who are proposing the next anti-trans bill what this does to their kids, the likelihood that their kid will try to harm themselves or even take their own lives, and they do it in the most generous, gracious way. If that was my kid, I would be so angry. I would be spitting mad. But they do this with compassion, and they try to invoke the empathy of these Republican legislators to get them to do the right thing. I love that. Let's have their backs, but let's also make sure that we're fighting for them tooth and nail to make sure that this state is their state just as much as it is anybody else's state. So you've got my commitment to be the leader that we needed in Texas for this and every single community. Thank you. Very good.
All right, you'll have to excuse me, I'm an educator and a master's student, so I came way over-prepared. So I know that you've already mentioned about higher salaries for educators. However, connecting with other educators nationwide, we are experiencing a great exodus. In states like Florida and Arizona, they're putting not as highly qualified individuals in the classroom to fill those spots. What is your plan to keep that from happening in Texas?
What a great question. Thank you. My youngest, who's 11, who just completed 5th grade, didn't have a permanent classroom teacher the entire academic year. And we love the subs. He had 5 of them. And I'm so grateful that they were willing to come in and help out. But you as an educator know what a difference it makes to be the same person day in, day out, that forms a bond with that kid can depend on. When I tell that story, and it doesn't matter what part of the state I'm in, I see heads nodding or people raise their hands and say, that was my kid this last academic year. So that exodus that she is talking about is real, and it is by the thousands right now. We cannot compound the problem by putting people in the classroom who are not yet ready to be in the classroom. We've got to demand not only the education and the training and the mentorship, if we have anything to do with it, where you've got a teacher such as yourself with the expertise and experience who can spend valuable time with that incoming teacher to make sure that he or she is fully prepared for the classroom that next year. But we also have to take it a step further. Right now, we ask you to take on tens of thousands of dollars of debt for the privilege of teaching our kids. We also ask you to work that second or third job to pay your way so you can return to the classroom Monday through Friday. This is a proposal. I want to try it out on you. But if you're willing to join one of these in-demand professions like teaching or nursing after 2 years of a pandemic, and cost is an object. You just cannot put together the money, or you're going to take on so much debt you don't want to think about it. What if the state of Texas pays your way or clears the debt in front of you so that you can get that training, so that we don't bring in people who do not have the expertise or experience necessary and place them into those classrooms? We have got to have your back, because I cannot think of a more important thing for the future of the state of Texas than our kids. And they're literally in your hands right now. So I want to make sure that we do everything we can for you, including funding public education at the highest level. Thanks for asking the question. Really appreciate it.